All right, so we're talking about lizards.
Yeah.
So here's my first question. How do you attract lizards to your garden?
Well, there are ways to attract lizards. The biggest thing is you want to create a habitat. So creating a habitat includes components of food, water, shelter, and space.
Okay.
So most lizards are insect eaters, so you want to try to attract insects. So incorporating native plants is a great way to draw in insects.
Okay.
Lizards also are cold-blooded animals, so their body temperature is related to what the outside temperature is. So our temperature doesn't really change. We're what's called warm-blooded.
Yeah.
But cold-blooded animals like lizards have to use behavior to change their temperature. So putting spots for them to warm up and cool down. So rocks out in the sun where they can warm up really quickly, or hiding spots, snag piles, things like that, where they can escape the heat of the sun as well.
How about that? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
All right, so you say they eat insects. What kind of insects?
So it kind of depends on the lizard, if they're climbing lizards or ground-dwelling lizards, but mainly they're going to be looking for the biggest payoff. So the bigger the insect, fat caterpillars, things like that, that can give them a lot of energy. They're typically going to go after crickets, stuff like that.
Okay. So somebody's probably wondering, so the benefits, I mean, why do we need to have them in our garden anyway?
Yeah, so anytime you're attracting a predator, it means you're doing a really good job at creating a whole habitat. So when you see lizards, which are predators to insects, it means you're doing something right. They're going to help control insect populations in your garden and keep everything in balance that way too, so you're not overrun with a bunch of insects.
Wow, so habitat. It's all about the habitat.
It's all about creating a habitat.
Okay. And you mentioned space. So you said they need space?
Yeah, so all animals need space to raise young. So lizards are going to be laying eggs. And so depending on the lizard, they can lay them in different places, mulch piles sometimes, or compost piles. We're going to talk about one that loves to lay in compost piles. But yeah, so just providing some of that space for them to raise young or lay their eggs.
Okay. So now, we don't want to be using insecticides, right? If we want to attract those lizards, you know, to our habitats. So
right, because insecticides a lot of times are not specific to one type of insect, and so you're basically killing off the food source for the lizards.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely don't want to do that. We're trying to attract them because they're helping us out.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, they're way better at catching insects than we are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's for sure. All right. So, what did you bring for us today?
Okay. Well, I brought a really interesting one to start with.
All right.
This is called a glass lizard.
Glass. Okay.
So, let me get him to calm down here. So, what's the first thing you notice about this lizard?
Yes. No legs.
That's right. Yeah. So legs aren't necessarily a characteristics of lizards. Wow. That's not what separates them from snakes, but there are two characteristics that separate lizards from snakes, and you can see it on their face. Calms down here for a minute.
Just a little excited.
Yeah, so if we look at his face, one, he's got an opening right behind his eyes, and those are ears. So snakes don't have external ears. So those holes right there are one of the characteristics of a lizard. The other one is he can blink, right? So snakes
blink?
Yeah, so snakes don't have eyelids, but lizards do. So those are the two main characteristics to tell lizards from snakes. Now something else well, this lizard's actually, he's kind of getting ready to shed. He's got a few scales coming off. But one of the defense mechanisms of a lot of lizards is when they feel threatened, they can drop their tails. And their tails continue to wiggle and move to distract the potential predator. And so this one, years and years ago, over 10 years ago, this lizard lost part of its tail.
I can tell.
Yeah, so you can see they will grow back, but they typically don't grow back as long. And a lot of times they're a different color as well.
Wow.
Yeah, so just a really interesting lizard. Glass lizards are found in the southeastern United States and mainly coastal plains. So sandy areas near beaches and dunes is where a lot of times you'll see this in its native habitat.
How long do they live?
Well, this one has been at the Nature Center for over 10 years, so sometimes they can be 15, 20 years old. In the wild, their lifespans are a lot shorter because obviously they have predators, things like raccoons and opossums, coyotes, things like that.
Okay. Wow, how about that?
And you want to meet another one?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
This is a snake. I can see how people can tell, look at that and be like, oh, it looks like a snake.
Right, but then when you look close at its face, you can see it's got those holes, and if it blinks, it's not a snake.
Wow.
Okay, so this next one I brought is a lot different. He's really bright, right?
Yeah.
So this is called a green anole. Now I'm not gonna get him out because I'm not sure I could catch him again. But what's so unique about green anoles is they are native to North America, and they're one of the only native color changing lizards. So they don't change like chameleons, but they can change from a green to a brown color. And so right now he's mainly on the substrate that's green, but if we had more brown in there, you would see him start to change over to a brown color.
What causes them to change colors though?
So it's mainly their background, and with these guys it takes some time, and so the color is a way to camouflage on what they are and hide from potential predators, birds, things like that for these ones.
Wow, how about that? Now how long do they live?
Not as long, maybe just a few years.
Just a few years?
Yeah. These guys are good climbers, as you can see.
Yeah, I can see.
And more common in the South, especially places like Florida, you'll see them all over.
Yeah, yeah.
We brought one more lizard to talk about, and this is a different type too, and you can see he's gonna look a lot different than the anole we just talked about. This one is a skink, S-K-I-N-K. And skinks are characterized by these short stubby legs. There's 15 species across North America, so kind of every different region in North America has their own kind of skink. This one is called a 5-line skink. So really, now this is a female. Her lines aren't as defined as the male, and she's a little bit older too.
Okay.
But when they're younger, what's really interesting is they have blue tails. So their first couple years of life, they're gonna have these blue tails because in the wild, blue is usually a sign that it's a dangerous or a poisonous or venomous animal. These guys are not, but they're kind of tricksters. And so to protect the young ones, they have those blue tails, but as they get older, they lose that blue coloration on their tails.
So what do skinks eat?
Skinks are the same way, a lot of ground-dwelling insects. Now these guys can climb okay, but they're going after a lot of things on the ground. And this is the one I was mentioning before about the compost or the mulch pile. So that's where the, skinks like to lay their eggs. And the 5-line skinks are really interesting because in most lizards, there's no parental care. They lay the eggs and leave. But in 5-line skinks, the female will stick around the eggs until they hatch, which is pretty unique. Yeah, so with these guys, a way to attract them is if you've got a mulch pile, and you've got those basking spots, big rocks, and then of course you're incorporating native plants to attract your insects, you're probably gonna attract some skinks as well.
So guess what? We actually had skinks in our butterfly garden.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
They're helping us out, right? So
Absolutely.
Again, don't have to use any insecticides because the skinks are helping us out.
That's right, that's great.
That is pretty good. So let's say this again. In order to attract these to our gardens, what do we need to do?
So always think of create a total habitat. So not just incorporating one thing, like a basking spot, you might get some, but if you're incorporating a food source, like insects, bring them in with your native plants, shelter, so even things like under overturned pots to give them a place to get out of the heat in the middle of the summer, and then water sources too. Mainly you don't have to incorporate like a big water source for them because they're taking little droplets of water. So you could have a little fountain, you might see them come to that, or a little water feature as well will attract them.
That'd be good. You know, I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, my mom is scared of lizards.
Really?
Yeah, I need to tell Mom, come on now, they're beneficial.
Yeah, these guys are totally beneficial. So, and even our glass lizard, who kind of looks like a snake, really beneficial and not too scary.
Not too scary.
Yeah.
Man, always fun to have you here.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.